Hello and welcome to the world. I'm Yalda and I'm currently in London.
Hello, Yalda. I'm Richard Engel, and I am in Doha at the moment in this fancy hotel room, and I just got in from Tehran after a fascinating trip. I haven't slept. I haven't slept at all.
You're at a security conference.
I'm at a security conference. I'm in this fancy hotel.
You're literally wearing the clothes that you were wearing when you came off the plane from Tehran.
And I had to excuse myself because I literally got off the plane, lost my bag, so I just came here. I haven't slept in about 30 hours or something like that, and more probably. But it was a great trip. I'm still, fired up from it because it was so different. And we have so much to talk about today. 100 days of President Trump. I can tell you it feels like a lot longer. We're going to try and unpack some of the key foreign policy developments as this political earthquake continues.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. I'm really curious to get your assessment of what you felt the last 100 days has been like. And I'll be also discussing an interview I did with Pakistan's defense minister following the attack in Kashmir and a possible war between two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan.
And Yalda, I want to tell you more about this trip that I had to Iran. It was extraordinary. We've got some feedback about it, and I want to tell you exactly what I saw and the mood in Iran right now, because it's extraordinary.
And of course, follow us wherever you get your podcasts on Apple or Spotify, and send us your questions, thoughts. We really like getting them. Usual place, theworld@sky.uk. So, Richard, as we were saying, it is now 100 days since Donald Trump was inaugurated. And who could forget? I mean, I was there during the inauguration, reporting live
Do you ever even hear about President Biden anymore? When was the last time you heard his name mentioned?
But I do think it's American tradition, isn't it? That the president steps down and there's a peaceful transfer of power, and then he disappears into the night, and you don't really hear.
It didn't happen with the first administration under Trump.
No, he didn't disappear into the night. No, but it is American tradition. Every now and then, though, Biden reappears,
at the Pope's
or
funeral,
at least Donald Trump makes reference to the Biden administration and what he calls the failings of that administration, why he needs to fix it. But the last 100 days, for me, if you were to ask me how I would sum it up, I would say it was fast and furious. Donald Trump has tried to, in a very hyperactive way, do everything. And when we got to the end of the Biden administration, I would say that America was moving to the right. There was a lot of talk around wokeness and the frustration that people had that particular administration was sort of talking a lot about what it meant to be woke, and that's where the focus was, when actually most Americans were worried about grocery prices and they wanted change. And they voted for a president who'd promised to make America affordable again. He talked about not just making America great again, but reviving manufacturing in the United States. He talked about making America affordable again, and talked about the fact that he was going to bring down, grocery prices. And he talked about inflation and what a problem that was. And he was going to bring about fundamental change. He talked about deportations and that he wasn't going to allow these illegal aliens and gang members to be operating freely in the United States. And he was going to deport millions of people. He talked about taking on the Ivy League schools. And I think all of those things would have happened, and the American people were frankly voted for that. But he did it in such a hyperactive way. He did it in that kind of, and these are images that I think we both think about, the Elon Musk with a chainsaw way, where they slashed and burnt things down.
I don't know if Americans voted for having a chainsaw taken to their institutions.
That's what I mean. They did it in such a hyperactive way that I think we're now seeing that with the approval ratings, where in the United States, Americans are saying, we're not happy with the direction of the economy. We're not happy with the way that you are handling it. And frankly, his approval rating has plummeted. And Neil Ferguson, the historian, talked about that when he made certain predictions just a few weeks ago with us.
So our piece of this puzzle has always been to look at the United States and look at, I guess, the United States now under Trump from the outside in. And I can tell you, it's a bit of a mixed bag. People I talk to here in the Middle East, some of the Middle Eastern leaders like it. They're pretty optimistic. They like his style, and that might be shocking because more and more Americans that I'm obviously American, and more friends, family, colleagues back in the States are increasingly alarmed, increasingly horrified, increasingly frightened. But in this part of the world anyway, there are certain leaders who think, okay, that frenetic style, that frenetic pace, maybe it's going to work. Maybe it's bold initiatives. Maybe it's the kind of energy that we need. So it is a double-edged sword. It is cutting, and it is cutting everything that it touches. And I don't think we know exactly how it's going to slice when we're done. But a lot of people are getting cut to keep with the analogy just after the first 100 days. You remember in our previous conversations, I kept saying, and I kept going on and on saying, well, so the Americans are sleeping here. You know, things are changing and they're not moving, and they're not moving. And we got a few viewers who wrote in and said that I was being too hard. You know, we're 50 of us are going out on the street corners every day and nobody's paying any attention. I think maybe that's starting to change. And there was a story in the New Yorker. It was a David Remnick piece, and he was saying that after 100 days, maybe Americans are starting to wake up and shake off this shock and slumber. Don't know, but I think if we're looking at this period, looking back, I think you could say President Trump got elected. He came in with this mandate, whether it was exactly the mandate that he was given or he took it further. He went and he shocked America. And I think America and much of the world for the last 100 days has been in a state of paralysis. But maybe they're starting to move. And
the polls are now, speaking to that. His approval rating has fallen at the lowest level of any president in 70 years or so, especially for women and young people. So, I often thought that the Biden administration didn't understand how to use power. They talked about international law, but their way of deterrence was to de-escalate. And I feel like Trump and his administration don't understand America. And now we're seeing that reaction and response from Americans who are saying, this is not what we asked for.
Or maybe they did understand America.
Consumed.
Maybe, the people like us, we don't even live in the United States. I am American, but we cover, foreign affairs and how American foreign policy affects the world, and you cover international affairs, not just with an American perspective, and I don't either, but maybe he understands it better than we do. He did win. He did win by a lot.
The approval ratings don't seem to... No, he didn't win by a lot. He did get the popular vote, which he didn't
won by a lot.
The last time
The popular
around.
vote, it was a landslide election. It was over in an hour. I was there in the studio on election night. It was done quick. You want to break down the math and say, no, but there more people didn't. I guess he gamed the system. He mobilized his electorate machine.
But is
and
this,
it was
Richard,
a big
what
victory.
the American people want? Is this what the American people want?
I don't know.
That is the big question. I'm just looking at these, approval ratings here, and it says it's the lowest level, as I said, for any president in 70 years. A new CNN poll shows that 22% say they strongly approve of Trump's handling of the job, and 45% say they strongly disapprove. And again, notably, his approval rating from women, it's down 7 points to 36%, and Hispanics down 7 points. It felt to me, with the lead up to election and post-election night, that America was starting to move to the right. And yet, this is probably, I'm not sure, whether the Americans feel that, sending American troops to Gaza, or trying to figure out the war in Ukraine, or taking out troops from Syria, or, talking about, taking troops out of Iraq, or,
erasing
sort of
American black heroes from the Defense Department's website, like Jackie Robinson.
Is this... Exactly, dismantling these sorts of institutions like Voice of America, for example. Is this what the American people voted for? Is this what they wanted? I suspect they voted to not pay, sort of so much money for their groceries and to have multiple jobs and for sure, manufacturing to be revived in America, but for this kind of trade war, which will ultimately, as Trump said, no pain, no gain, this maximalist approach that he's taken to the trade wars. Is this what the American people ultimately voted for? I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I think there's still, we're only 100 days in, and we'll have to look at, the next 100 days and where he ends up getting us.
Whether this is something that Americans want, the approval ratings certainly suggest that they're shocked and they're afraid and they're not happy. They're not happy with the tariffs. They're not happy with the prices going down. They're not buying the no pain, no gain philosophy generally, according to the polls. But are they going to act? If this was Paris, they would be out on the streets already. Parisians, they changed the age at which people can retire, for a minuscule amount, and that they were burning down Paris practically. Americans so far haven't really taken any definitive action, but are they starting to? Will there be a spark? And I've covered enough conflicts that there's always a spark, and it's usually not what you're expecting. Sometimes it's a small thing. It's the arrest of somebody, or it's somebody that gets killed, or there's a Kent State happen in the United States. Are we going to have a summer of '68 this summer? Will 2025 be another 1968? I think it's possible. I think more and more with each day, with each week that passes, I think it's more and more likely that there's going to be some spark.
Or whether the American people just think, well, the midterms are around the corner, we'll wait till then. Certainly that's what the Democrats are doing at this point. They're saying, let this administration hang themselves.
Yes, when I talk to people in the United States, and I tell them that, and I think that I'm not in the most dominant opinion on this. When I say I think this summer could be the summer of '68, they say no, Americans don't have it in them. They're not going to move. They're too afraid, or they're too vested in the stock market, or whatever. They're not going to do it. But I think each month that passes, we get more close to that tipping point.
Let's talk about Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and we've talked about this on the podcast before. He's famously said that I can end that conflict within 24 hours of coming into power. He's now 100 days in power, and what have we seen? A flipping and a flopping, writing things on Truth Social like "Stop Vladimir, stop attacking Ukraine."
I've got it right here. I'm not happy with the Russian strikes on Kyiv. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop! 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. All caps!
And he has admitted that perhaps Putin is taking him for a ride, something that European so-called allies and Volodymyr Zelenskyy has warned him about when he went to the Oval Office. And that also is one of the iconic moments of the last 100 days, the big blow-up. I met with Zelenskyy when he came to London 24 hours after that blow-up and asked him how he felt. One of the things that he pointed out...
That was amazing. Remind me what happened in that meeting. So he had just been slapped around by President Trump, and you got to talk to him. What was he still in a state of shock?
Yeah, I mean, he came to London 24 hours after that big blow up in the Oval Office that left, was jaw-dropping and quite shocking for the entire world. I mean, there wasn't anyone that I didn't speak to, both in the foreign policy community and just in life in general, who didn't say, we saw that, we found it incredibly uncomfortable. It was the dressing down of this leader by the Trump administration. We expect these things to happen behind closed doors. I was just rereading journalist David Sanger's book that he published last year about the Biden administration. And one of the chapters focused on Zelensky's relationship with President Biden. And in it, he talks about the blow-ups behind closed doors, the often heated exchanges, the fact that for Biden, Zelenskyy was ungrateful. He described it specifically, and this was written in 2024, that President Biden found Volodymyr Zelenskyy ungrateful for all the support and help. So it feels very much like exactly the same thing. But what's the difference? Donald Trump, like the reality show that he likes to sort of run, he wanted it to be played out in front of the cameras, and that's what we saw take place.
So then, when Zelenskyy, when you had this amazing pull aside, or the timing was so amazing. What did he say? Or did he not want to go there? Or was he still wounded?
He partially didn't want to go there, but he also, one of the things he pointed out, Richard, was that this is Vladimir Putin taking Donald Trump for a ride. And if you fast forward to, this past weekend where we saw those iconic images of Zelenskyy sitting down, 2 chairs, at the Pope's funeral with Donald Trump.
They needed a curtain between the two of them.
It was quite extraordinary, wasn't it? That actually these 2 men sat down, and perhaps things are starting to move in the right direction for Ukraine. But, we've had so many guests on this program that have tried to guess what Donald Trump is thinking at any given time. I think my assessment of what happened at the weekend was, at least you didn't have those people who, pardon my language, an Australian phrase, and I don't know if you have it in America.
Is this going to get us a bad rating? Oh, there you go. Thanks. We're at E again.
There are those who shit stir, and Donald Trump is known to take the advice of the last person he spoke to. And it appears that those people were not there when he
They didn't
sat
get
down
invited to the
with
Pope's funeral.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy. It was just the two of them sitting
Well,
down,
Macron tried to
encouraged by
jump
the
in.
likes of Emmanuel Macron.
I said,
and he
"Emmanuel,
was told,
hey,
just
give me a minute."
Exactly. I mean, what's your assessment?
I don't know.
of
You know
it?
what? What worries me about this process is these consistent threats that Trump, we heard Rubio say it, we're going to walk away. If we're not showing progress, we got other things to do. We're busy. We don't have time. Okay, I think that's music to Putin's ears, because he walks away from the talks. It's not that the U.S. is just some impartial mediator here. The U.S. is supplying Ukraine with weapons. The Ukraine can't keep fighting without U.S. support. We've seen that Europe is, trying to rally and stuff. It hasn't really been able to materialize into anything significant. So when Trump says, "I'm going to walk away," is he talking about walking away from just the negotiations, or does he mean I'm going to walk away from this war, which means I'm going to walk away from Ukraine too? And I'm going to focus on Middle East or Iran deal, or North Korea is getting phone calls now too. Focus on some lower hanging fruit. And that could be enormously bad for Zelenskyy and very good for Putin, because they walk away from the deal. That's what Putin wanted from the beginning. He wanted to invade Ukraine and not have the U.S. intervene at all. I think he was expecting that the U.S. wouldn't really, and that Europe wouldn't rally, and that he would just walk over the country. It would be a done deal. So when Trump says, "I'm fed up with this, I'm going to walk away," does that mean turn off the tap to Ukraine too? I think Putin, say, "Okay, I'll wait. I'll grind him. I'll bore him. I'll slow it down until he loses interest."
What was it that the Taliban used to say? We've got the time. You've got the watches. We've got the time. And I guess that's what Putin is thinking. You've got your watches, but this is our region. This is our territory, and we've got all the time in the world.
And we'll keep waiting you out. Let's get into this thing about India, Pakistan. It was so big. I haven't heard Trump talk about it. It's gotten no attention, really. You talked about it a lot. I think it's enormously dangerous. Let's tell people what happened there. There was a terrorist attack in Kashmir. Where is Kashmir? Who's controlling it? What happened? Why do we care? How did this escalate so quickly?
Yeah, so I guess the roots of the conflict in Kashmir go back to partition between India and Pakistan in 1947. And this was, Kashmir, a majority Muslim territory, one of the most heavily militarized areas and zones on the planet, has often been a flashpoint for both sides. Both India and Pakistan claim it to be their own. But as I said, huge Indian military presence there for many, many years. And there was a sort of partially an uprising from within the people of Kashmir in the face of what they viewed as Indian military brutality. And then on the other hand, you had the Pakistani intelligence agencies funding, harboring, training militant groups to go in and launch attacks on the Indian military. And this time round, just a week or so ago, about 26 Indian tourists were killed in Kashmir by a group, a little-known group known as the Resistance Force, and it is an offshoot of the terrorist organization Lashkar-e-Taiba. And the Pakistani military has been known for decades to back many of these terrorist organizations, including Lashkar-e-Taiba, and we're talking training, giving them arms and weapons, using them as a proxy group alongside various others. Now, I had this extraordinary interview with the Pakistan defense minister because, of course, the reason why, Richard, the world should be worried about this moment.
I would not have wanted to be on the other side of that.
You saw that interview because, frankly, I mean, the reason why the world should be worried, while this is a flashpoint and things do flare up every now and then between the two countries, the last time was in 2019 and there was a series of airstrikes that India launched on Pakistan. And Donald Trump, don't forget, was in power at the time and showed his support for the Modi government who launched the attacks in 2019. But one of the things that is of concern, of course, is that these are two nuclear-armed states. So if they are suddenly at war, it could get incredibly dangerous. But it was really fascinating to hear the Pakistan Defense Minister, Khawaja Asif. First of all, I was surprised that they were willing to do the interview. Secondly, he cancelled one day because their National Security Council was meeting and they were both India and Pakistan were thinking about the series of measures they were going to take. So I went in and conducted this interview assuming that he would deny, which is something that we've always heard from the Pakistani side, especially from the civilian government, that they have no links to terrorist organizations, that they don't fund or harbor or give any kind of military training to these terrorist organizations. I just assumed totally, always, I don't know what you're talking about. This is India saying this, and
anti-Pakistan propaganda.
Exactly. And so then I put this to him and I said to him, in 2018, the Trump administration cut military aid to you because of your Pakistan's links to terrorist organizations. And they felt you were playing a double game, especially in Afghanistan. And because of course they were supporting the Afghan Taliban as well. And when I said you admit that you have trained these different terrorist organizations, he said, yes, I do admit this. We don't do it anymore, but we used to.
that was the weird part about it. So you were talking about this current volatile situation, and he's like, no, we didn't do it. It's a false flag. The Indians did it to blame us. But sure, yes, we did this in the past. Yeah, we used to fund these areas. That was a moment that surprised you.
I think a lot of people wrote to me, to say. The look on your face was one of almost your jaw dropped. You were quite shocked that he'd made this admission because, of course, for decades they've been questioned around this and they've just denied. And suddenly, they're admitting it. But I just want to play you the clip, Richard, from the actual interview where we have this exchange. Have a listen.
You do admit, sir, that Pakistan has had a long history of backing and supporting and training and funding these terrorist organizations.
Well, we have been doing this dirty work for the United States for about 3 decades, and West, including Britain.
So that's your argument that even though
that was a mistake, and we suffered for that, and that is why you are saying this to me. If we had not joined the war against Soviet Union and later on the war after 9/11. This Pakistan's track record, was not, unimpeachable track record.
It's interesting. So he's obviously talking about the Mujahideen
Did you
war.
see my face?
With the pause and the pause.
Yes.
You're like, because it was the what? Oh, that's that. There are, what do they say? Journalism's first draft of history. It's nice when you get a first draft of history, when you get a senior official saying, yes, we did this. And I think it came out sort of inadvertently because you were talking about current events. And he's like, listen, we're just being blamed because we funded these militant organizations in the past. And we did that at the behest of the CIA and British intelligence, which is also true, by the way. The CIA was deeply involved in training groups, the Mujahideen, so that they could fight against the Soviet Union and bring down the Soviet Union. And then after they got, ignored, these militant radicals were abandoned and turned on the West and turned on the United States. Hence 9/11 changed the world we're living in. But it's fun and it's interesting when you get to get it. I don't want to say in black and white because we're not working with typewriters anymore. But when you get it on the record.
Yeah, I think it's exactly as you put it. We've both covered the Afghan war for such a long time.
What's your family history? Isn't that why your family had to leave because of this war?
Well, they left during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And as the defense minister rightly said, that admission, he's correct when he says that, we did this dirty work because the CIA wanted us to back and fund and train on our soil and send over the border to fight the Soviets.
But Yalda, you missed the point. They're not doing it anymore, he was saying. We're not doing it anymore, so don't blame us for the past deeds, which you asked us to do, by the way. So where does this go? Where is this going? You think is this going to get escalated? Is this going? India is now threatening to cut off the water supply, dam the rivers going into Pakistan. Pakistan is fully expecting some sort of military retaliation from India, as you mentioned. Big countries, nuclear weapons. Obviously, India is much more powerful, but Pakistan's no joke. It has a big army and.
Absolutely.
Where do you think
this is why, and actually Donald Trump on Air Force One just a few days ago was asked about, the escalating tensions. He's having to deal with not just the war between Hamas and Israel and the devastation in Gaza. He's trying to get a peace deal out of Ukraine. We're going to talk about Iran in just a moment, where we think that there might be some kind of nuclear deal. But can this administration also have in its in-tray a conflict that erupts between India and Pakistan, two nuclear-armed states? And as you say, no joke, if these two countries go to war. Let's take a quick break, Richard, come back and let's talk about your trip to Iran. You've just come out, and also we've had a lot of audience reaction to some of the things you said, so we're going to put that to you.
Let me talk a few of the logistics. I would leave my hotel with the team, with a crew, and would just get in a taxi and go and do interviews on the street. And we weren't asking permission. We weren't followed by a minder. That is unusual in Iran. Women were...
For you, but is that the case for, and this is what I want to get to, because we talked at length about all of this and it was extraordinary.
That doesn't happen by accident. That we got a visa. We were the only Western journalists in the country, and just flagged down a cab and go.
So I actually want to get to what you said about women in Iran, because you said
that's the biggest change, biggest, most visible change.
The lack of headscarves that you saw, but the feedback we were getting from a lot of women in the diaspora, expats, Iranians living across the planet, who were saying, listen, Richard is getting this treatment because he's an American journalist, but women in that country continue to be brutalized. There are still protests that are still taking place. There are still people being thrown inside prisons. There's the Noor plan that came into effect mid last year, where women police are deployed and rounding women up. 11 people are on death row.
There's a surveillance system being trialed in the city of Isfahan. I'm not here to sell things that everything is great in Iran, and I'm not representing the Iranian revolutionary government. That's not my job, not my responsibility, not my interest. But you can tell when you're on the streets that things are different. We get out of the hotel, we get into a cab. I don't care if they're following us or not. We're going where we want to go. We're stopping. We were doing this every day, stopping, taking out our camera, interviewing people we chose at random. When we took out our cameras and we started interviewing women who were not wearing their headscarves, they didn't care. They didn't wrap it up. They didn't hide from us. They were waving to the camera and smiling. And I would say about 30% of the women. I saw women walking by police stations without covering their hair. And we asked them specifically about it, and they said, we're brave and we're doing it, and we know there are risks. So yeah, there are risks. Maybe this is temporary. Maybe the government's going to smash down on this and clamp down hard, and it just can't do it right now. And that might be coming, probably is coming, but it's not happening right now, because I think the system is overwhelmed.
Richard, I want you to give, just to in response to the high volume of people who have reacted to you saying this. I mean, they're saying over 900 people were executed in 2024 alone.
And
thousands of people are still lingering in one of the most brutal prisons in Iran, Evin prison, where writers, activists, journalists have been locked up for speaking up against the regime. Gross human rights violations by this regime. I just want you to give that, and I know what you're saying is what you saw, what you witnessed, and you've been to Iran before, and you've seen a difference, and as you say, you're given a visa, you're given access.
Are talking about a difference. So the diaspora community, by the way, the diaspora community can also be, really angry, and I don't want to be painted as someone who's some sort of Iran regime sympathizer. But you gotta be straight.
Of course not.
You gotta tell people what you see. That's my job, right? Whether you like it or you don't like it. This is what I saw. This is how we saw it. I went to the Iran Contemporary Art Museum, for example. Great. I saw some of these amazing works. There's 4,600 works of modern art that were bought by the wife of the late Shah right before the revolution, and the revolutionary regime locked them in the basement, didn't like them, thought they were ugly, offensive, un-Islamic, anti-revolutionary. They're out on display. The museum was packed, and people in the museum, women, were watching, looking at the exhibits, not wearing headscarves, many of them, not being hassled. The descriptions of the artwork were straight. They were just talking about the art. There was a long video piece that I watched, and this one really struck with me. The famous work Guernica, right? It's probably the most famous piece of anti-war art ever created. I watched the video being played, which was in English and had Farsi subtitles. And I think maybe they'd just taken it straight from the Prado or someplace like that. So it played it straight. It talked about fascism. It talked about the Spanish Civil War. It talked about Picasso. And the explanation ended how the painting returned to Spain after it had been in the United States, and didn't say, in the United States, the great Satan. It played it straight. It was just talking about this history of this piece of art, and how it returned to Spain after the end of fascism and the restoration of democracy. That was the happy ending for the description of Guernica at the Tehran Museum. It's a little thing, but they played it straight, and they didn't necessarily have to. And is that massive change? Does that mean everything is great and all the women are out of their prison and off death row? Absolutely not. But you gotta see what you see, and there are changes, and the women there recognize it. I spoke to women, and we have the clips. We'll put them online. They were saying, "We're doing this, and we're doing this because all these other women sacrificed, because all these women stood up and were clubbed and were beaten. We overwhelmed the regime, and we're now embracing these little tiny bits of freedom, of resistance freedom that they've gotten. They're worried that this is just a little window that's opening up, and that as soon as the deal is done and that Iran gets money from the deal, that they're going to be in a better position to slam the door shut again. That could easily happen. But right now, something is changing. Something is happening.
But deal or no deal, I think what they wanted, and audiences wanted us to point to, was that human rights organizations say that 938 people or more have been executed by this regime. That's a threefold increase since 2021. So I guess, I totally hear what you're saying. This is a regime that's operated in this way since 1979. You've made multiple trips there. You can see the small bits of changes that they didn't need to put on display for.
They didn't put them on display. They went around Tehran and told 30% of the entire population of 17 million to take off their headscarves while I happened to be there for 10 days. I mean, no, that didn't happen. But why is it happening right now? Is it because they've changed their will? There is a government there that is considered a moderate reformist government, not the supreme leader, but the new current government. And also, look what's happened. Their outer armor has been ripped off. Hezbollah is basically so badly beaten. I don't say it's gone, but it's really very weak. Hamas decimated. The fall of the Syrian regime, that was something they did not expect. And that outer armor kept Iran safe. The next arrow it's not going to get stopped by the outer arrow anymore. It's going into their chest, and they're nervous. So they don't have a lot of money. The people were rising up. The women were rising up, and they lost their proxies around them, and they're trying to make a deal. They want to make a deal. So maybe the women aren't the priority for now, but that's interesting. You gotta like the same way your interview with the Pakistani. You notice things. You notice little things because they're important. So if this all goes back and it all backfires and everything maybe snaps back in repression, people will say, Richard, you were wrong. You see, it was like this all along. Yeah, sure, probably, maybe, who knows. But right now, this is happening. Right, and that's important. And it's happening right now, and it's not make-believe. It really is happening right now.
Well, thank you for clarifying, because I think we were overwhelmed with responses from the audience.
I love responses.
And there was a feeling that
I love angry responses. Good. People should be fired up. I want them to be fired up. If you're not fired up, what's the point?
Richard, your prediction for this week.
Ooh. Well, I kind of gave a little bit of a prediction earlier that I think after 100 days of slumber, maybe Americans are starting to wake up, and that we could have a summer of 68. We'll see. Summer, people are home, it's hot, time for, generally those are the kind of times when you have agitation. So are we going to have a summer of 68 and summer of 25? It's looking increasingly possible. But the more short-term prediction is I think we may have a deal in some sort of deal or a framework of a deal on Iran. I think Trump needs a win. I think Iran is a lower hanging fruit because it's a pretty easy deal. It's a transactional kind of deal. There's no territory involved. It's just sanctions relief for nuclear reduction. There already was a deal in place. So I think that they probably do get some sort of deal over the line. I'm hearing pretty optimistic things about a Syria deal, that Syria coming out of its sanctions box, people giving the new regime a chance. I think that's coming. So I would put those, I guess that would be 3. You got 3 predictions, three for the price of 1. And you?
Well, look, we were here. We were here for the first 100 days, giving our analysis from different parts of the world every single week, and I think that's what we're going to continue to do over the course of the next 100 days. But for me, just following the sort of outrage off the back of that defense minister's interview and the terrorist attack that took place in Kashmir, I'm going to keep my eye very closely on India and Pakistan, because while most of the world is focused on Ukraine, for example, and as you say, this Iran deal may be something that happens quite quickly, I think that we really need to keep an eye on this conflict, because they're 2 nuclear armed countries, and it could get incredibly dangerous if this escalates, and whether Donald Trump has the capacity or capability to try and de-escalate the situation and put pressure on both sides, to sort of come to the negotiating table and figure this out.
Yalda, to be continued.
Absolutely. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much to our listeners for listening, and see you next week.
Thank you. And if you've got comments, send them. Angry comments, happy comments, whatever you want. And I to be honest, the angry ones are a little more fun, because it means people are engaged, they're listening. I don't want hate mail, but a little spice, a little passion, good. If you're not excited and passionate about the state of the world right now, with Trump in the White House taking a chainsaw effectively to the institutions of government, India and Pakistan with daggers drawn, the Middle East in flux. If this doesn't get you a little fired up, then listen to another podcast.